My guest today is Nehama Shechter-Baraban from Arc Intelligence. Let's jump into the conversation. So welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast, here recording live from AU. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us, Nehama.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
I wonder if you can start by, I love hearing the kind of the origin stories. How did you get into the industry to begin with? Give us kind of your background of it.
Yeah, I like to always say that I'm like a panda bear, like a very rare creature. I'm a landscape architect who is doing I'm working in a technology company, which is really weird. Landscape architecture is like a very small discipline, and I'm not such a tech savvy person, right? But I just like technology. So it all started a few years ago when I simply saw all my architecture friends doing Revit.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do, because AutoCAD, I don't want to say nasty words, but I didn't like it.
You liked Revit better.
So then I was looking for a way to adopt Revit for landscape, which was very, very hard. And somebody told me, oh, there's this guy, Ilya, he can teach you how to do Revit in landscape. So that's how I met Ilya, who became my boss today. He's a landscape architect also, and he started to develop tools for Revit that allows landscape architecture to actually be modeled with like a true BIM environment, right? With native Revit elements. Yeah, and that's how it all started. Eventually I quit, the design practice, and I just work for Environment for Revit. I teach, I work with our clients, I make sure we're aligned with industry needs. And that's a lot of fun because I get to meet architects and landscape architects and civil engineers from all over the world. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've been seeing this rise of popularity around topographies, especially when it comes to Revit. What do you think is causing this really maybe renaissance or wave coming around?
I think it's just the inefficiency of the out-of-the-box tools of topographies. And then we started the past few years, we worked really hard to create this hype around how easy and flexible it can actually be. And then I think people are just starting to find out about it. And also at the same time, Revit invested in improving this category that's called TopoSolid. So combining these two together, people got really interested in it. Even architects, they start to acknowledge the site around the building or the excavation under the building and stuff like that, which is down our alley. So it's really good.
Yeah. So how does integrating topographies in Revit, how does that really help create the efficiency on the design side? What should an architect kind of have in mind on that?
So yeah, again, it really depends if you're an architect or a landscape architect, because landscape architects, the core of what we do is fine grading. And that was the main setback for them to adopt Revit and to march with the entire AEC industry, right? So that's, a core part of what we do. And it has always been like that. We have always looked at fine grading and topographies as the main thing we want to enable. And then for architects, it just enables them to actually, so a lot of times as a landscape architect, I saw architects just thinking that their building is placed out in outer space, not really sitting on the ground. And when these tools are so easy to use and intuitive, they can finally do the simple grading, right? They don't have to do the fine grading, but they can do the simple grading. They can relate to the existing site better, and they can acknowledge the design of what happens when the building meets, the city and the area around it, which is very important.
So maybe a obvious question here, but what you're talking about really is the context that the building finds itself in. Why is that important for a traditional architect, not a landscape architect, but an architect to have in their mind when they're going in and designing a building?
Well, I think the context is everything. So you know how sometimes there's a really beautiful building, but it doesn't look beautiful because when you meet it as a human being on a street level, you just see a piece of concrete. And then some buildings, when you walk by them, you're like, that's amazing. It's because it relates to the human experience of walking next to it. So that's one part. The other part is, of course, money, right? If you misplace your building on the existing terrain and you don't build it correctly on the existing terrain, it can just cost a lot more. So you have to fill or dig too much or fill too much. Also, I had clients that didn't, like, for example, they didn't correctly geolocate their project, which is also a feature that we had. And they ended up building the building like half a meter from the correct location, and it cost them millions. Like, you'd be surprised how much these mistakes can cost. So it's both, I think, a design issue, but also like an engineering issue, like, right, the costs and the understanding of where your building sits and the experience of it.
I love that you started with the human experience and how people walk through the space and think about the space and navigate it. I think that can so often be overlooked and missed because you're focused on the function of the building and the aesthetics of the building and making that, but at the end of the day, the building is going to be used by people. So you need to have it front and center.
Exactly. And I think we were like, at the beginning, we were really surprised at how many of our clients are actually architects, because we're aimed at landscape, but we were surprised to see how many architects are adopting our tools. And it was like, when we found out about it, we're like, great. So we're going to teach architects how to do topography, right? And I think like buildings are such a big thing, right? The environment can be overlooked, but I think that's also the beauty of BIM and Revit, that you always have the option to go to the human experience level and look at your model from that angle. And that's really amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So on the sustainability side of things, how does that factor into topographies and this experiential element that we're talking about?
Wow, that's a very common question these days, I have to say. And that's a topic that we're thinking about a lot. The way I see sustainability is it's a state of mind for designers. So, for example, let's go to the very, very obvious thing, right? Planting a lot of trees is sustainable, right? Because trees clean up our air. And then when you plant a lot of trees, you need to have a good habitat for them within the ground or the sidewalk place for them to grow, and the ground should be healthy. So that's very sustainable. And then it doesn't really matter what tool you use. If you have the sustainable mindset, you'd be able to do it. So that's why we don't look at sustainability as a specific topic that should have tools for sustainability, because what we're enabling really good and efficient design. For example, we have a tool that allows you to create and manage your planting species and to place them in the model correctly and tag them and understand them. That's like as sustainable as possible. So we have tools that allows you to understand the cut and fill of your site and allows you to see the existing site in relation to the proposed site. So for example, if you want to preserve as many of the existing ground, you can do it. That's very sustainable. In buildings, it's really important to calculate like carbon emission because you have a lot of materials like concrete and metal, but we're dealing with, the sidewalks and the urban environment. And for us, it's more important to just allow you to be very, very flexible with your design and to make it very intuitive so you'll be able to do anything. And sustainability is the mindset of the designer. And that's how essentially we see it.
Yeah. Nice. So let's talk about kind of the varied designs or the terrains that you come across. How do you factor that? What are some of the challenges that come along with, whatever terrain that you might have? How should you think through coming into that design?
Ask it again.
So when you're dealing with a varied design or terrain, I'm going to start over again. When you're dealing with all the different terrains that you might come across, how does that get factored into the overall design? And then bringing that into Revit, how do you think through that? What are the challenges that a designer faces in that?
Well, that's a very interesting question because it really depends on the type of project and the intention that you have, right? So we had for example, one project, really interesting project in Norway. The developer of the area, he just bought a huge area and it was literally a forest, right? But he wanted to build a few houses in this forest and he had also this steep terrain. So the conditions were like crazy. And I'm saying that because it depends on what your purpose is. His purpose was to preserve as many of the trees and as much of the natural grading of the earth. So what we did over there, we used a point cloud of this forest. And for example, with environment, he was able to in 5 minutes create the very accurate terrain. And so you can start to play with your buildings in the very conceptual design phase. Just start to place them on the terrain and visualize how many trees are you cutting off, how much of the terrain are you changing, where would like the machines go through when they want to build this house. And all of this visualization is possible because you have the point cloud and you have the real Revit TopoSolid under that, so you can get the quantities and you can really see what you're doing as you're designing. So I think it varies. You know, some projects, they just get the site and they're like, okay, let's ruin everything and build something new. And again, while working with Revit environment, you can always see the differences between the existing terrain and your new design. But we're always enabling the other thing as well. It depends on the intention.
Yeah. So as Revit continues to evolve, where do you see the advancements in topographies going?
I have to be honest, I think we're 90% there.
Really?
Yeah, I think we're 90% there. What we are trying to develop now is less like topography things. I mean, we're trying to develop more sophisticated design elements. So for example, we're trying to allow roads and streets and pathways to be designed a lot easier in Revit. So creating alignments, and we're treating it as topographies as well. So we look at a road as some sort of a topography, but it's kind of a different way to look at it because it has a center line and it's a linear object. Yeah, so I think topographies are more or less there if you're working, again, full disclosure, right? But if you work with environment, we're pretty much there, I think.
Yeah, nice. So AI, obviously a huge buzzword. It's a lot of the conversation around here at AU this year. How does AI factor into environment for Revit or the topography in general?
Wow, great question. So first of all, we have this internal joke because the environment for Revit, our company is Arc Intelligence, so it's AI. So that's our constant joke that we've always been AI.
There you go.
So I think AI has so much potential with design in general and with site design as well. We have a lot of ideas. We actually made our first step into the AI world yesterday by releasing a new Autodesk Forma tool. So this tool is out of the box and it's free in the Forma extension, and it allows you to basically calculate the cut and fill and earthwork calculations for a project. So you can be 5 minutes after you started a project and already provide this data of the earthwork calculation, which is a lot of money in a project. So you can get an estimation of whether the building should go in the ground and have like 3 stories or basement, and how much ground you'll have to take out for that. Or do you want to make it really even, the cut and fill? And then next, we're going to develop a lot of terrain editing tools within Forma. So they'll be a little bit different than a Revit terrain editing tools, because there you want to be really detailed design. In Forma, they're supposed to give you like an optimization, for example, of a road position or understanding of more or less how you should play with the ground. And then you'll be able to import that into Revit and continue to work with that. So we want to make it as flexible in Forma as possible, so people will be able to kind of do more of the urban design, not only the building. And that's how we look at AI. So we're allowing you to model, and then you can use the Forma AI to get all these amazing insights about your project very, very fast into the project.
Very cool. So you were talking a bit there. Anything else in the kind of product roadmap for environment for Revit?
Yeah, so we actually do a lot more than just working with terrains and topographies. In Forma, what we want to do is, as I said, road optimization. Also, we want to work with acoustic walls and retaining walls in general, which has a huge influence on big projects, both visually and also like acoustic walls has like a quality of life influence. And in Forma, they do a really great noise analysis, right? So that's one. With environment for Revit, we're going to a few directions. We're kind of doing a lot of things at once. We're going to really improve our actually point cloud to Revit tools. So now we have only the topography from the point cloud, but we want to allow you to do so much more from point clouds so that you would not have to move in another software in the middle. You could just push the point cloud into Revit and start to model.
Nice.
We also want to improve the alignments. So we want to have more tools for engineers to build roads and to have a very, very intuitive workflow for building roads, because right now it requires a lot of skills. And of course, a lot of work with plantings. We're landscape architects. We never forget where we came from. So we want to allow access to planting databases. And when it comes, for example, to sustainability and carbon footprint, we want you to be able to know where this plant came from. Where's the nursery? Is it close to your site, far from your site? How much carbon footprint would it be to bring it there? So there's really a lot of directions that we're taking all at once. Sometimes it's even crazy for me to follow, I have to say.
So how do you maintain all those the focus on all those different directions at the same time? It's ambitious to tackle that many things.
Yeah, we have like a wide scope. For us, I mean, we maintain it. I think the challenge is communicating it to our clients and make sure that every time that we add functionality and add a new tool, our challenge is to make sure that our clients know about it and can take advantage of it and can really utilize all the amazing options that are within Environment for Revit and now with Forma as well. So that's more or less our challenge. And it's kind of a marketing challenge or communication challenge with the clients. One of the things that we're constantly working on is also like creating online resources. So we have a YouTube channel that is very active, and we're trying to make it like a very reliable professional resource for architects, landscape architects, or site engineers to go to and learn about our tools and what they can do. And yeah, hopefully it will work.
That's awesome. Well, any kind of misconceptions that are out there you feel like on the either the topography or landscape architecture in general that should be debunked here?
Well, the first one is that Revit is not a tool for landscape architecture. That's not true. We've had such a big success with clients all over the world with really amazing multidisciplinary projects where the landscape architects were doing everything in Revit and they were able to like integrate themselves into the project seamlessly. So never hesitate if you want to, even if we have a lot of clients that are architects who are doing the site design, don't hesitate. Like Revit is a perfect place to do that. I think that's the first one. And the second one is a message to architects. Always geolocate your project. It's important where you are on planet Earth. We've had so many mistakes, in big projects from our clients. And that's like something that we're working hard to spread the message out there. And we also, again, have a dedicated tool to help doing that in a very, very intuitive way.
So that brings up the question, then why is that a stumbling block? Why do people not geolocate as much as what they should, which is every time?
I think it's, first of all, because historically, I think in the profession of architecture, they were working in AutoCAD and it wasn't as important as it is in Revit. And then, the surveyor could just like take their 2D image and just place it in the correct location. So they never had to think about it. But also, I think it's because Revit coordinate system is a little bit complicated to understand, because it works independently from the local coordinate system and the global coordinate system. And it's like something that I was not even aware of. I had to like teach myself that and to like understand the story around that in order to understand how important that is. And then that's why Ilya and I were working for, I think, more than 6 months on writing this story and explaining it in the most simple way. We're like, okay, we have to find a way to make it really easy and intuitive for people to understand why it's important to geolocate. And I think, a lot of the collaboration issues are because it's not geolocated, but it's just an awareness thing. It's just like an education thing.
Yeah, a training issue there that needs to be addressed. Interesting. So as we start to kind of land the plane here, a couple rapid fire questions for you. So what is the phrase modeling the future? What does that bring up in your mind?
I don't know. For me, it brings up like what I wish design would be. I'm dealing with the technology side, but I'm very naive in how I see urban design and like the function I think urban design should have in our world. And so healthier cities, greener cities, more public spaces. I'm a landscape architect. That's what I dream about, big parks.
That's awesome. What about innovation? A concept that we talk a lot about here on the podcast. How would you define the word innovation?
Well, I think the technology should be less of a barrier for designers. That's what I think. Every step that we take in trying to innovate our tools, and I think also Autodesk, the purpose is to make technology less of a barrier, more intuitive. And like, I dream that designer could just like do this like in future movies. And think about the design purpose, think about the sustainability, think about the human experience, and think less about the tiny parameters of the tools.
Seems like we're getting a whole lot closer to that state. I think of CSI when they're starting to move everything around.
Exactly.
And very futuristic thing, but I think we're getting close to there.
I can see it happening.
Maybe not the holograms, this year, but a couple of years down the road, maybe.
Yeah, we're still at a stage where people actually have to put the time to gain the skills.
Right.
And I mean, it's very good because it helps. I see it personally. I think technology helped my career a lot, but we're getting there. We're making it more and more intuitive.
That's awesome. Well, how do people find out more information on environment for Revit and connect with you guys and figure out what all you have going on?
Well, first of all, they can always reach out to Greytech because you guys are our resellers. So there are a few really amazing consultants in Greytech that have learned our product, very well and are able to train. So that's something that we worked on quite a lot, and we're very happy to have a Greytech representative able to give service to clients. And other than that, we have our website, arcintelligence.com. We have a contact us button, and we're a very small company, so we always answer pretty fast.
That's awesome. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing, what would you pick to innovate?
Wow.
I save it for the end. It's the doozy right at the end.
I would just put trees everywhere. Giant trees.
Nice. Old established trees everywhere. Right?
Yeah. Did you know that they lower the temperature in 5 degrees Celsius?
Really?
Yeah. It's like having an air conditioner in the street. And I live in a very hot place, so that's why I love trees so much.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Thank you.